Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, So Little Time, and my name is Karen. So today's vlog is to go through the Nina Lee Carnaby Dress sew along. So firstly, I have purchased some fabric from Guthrie Ghani, which you would have seen in a previous vlog. Now I only purchased 1.5 meters of this fabric. It's a cotton fabric and it's actually quite narrow. So I have only just managed to squeeze those pattern pieces onto that piece of fabric. So if you're going to be going out and buying fabric specifically for this dress, then I would advise definitely to get 2 meters. The size I'm going to be making is a size 10 graded out to a 12, and literally the pieces have only just been squeezed on by a hair's breadth, and I've actually had to use a little bit of the selvage as well just to get them to fit on. So I will insert a picture of how I laid those pieces out so you can see how I managed to get them on. But yeah, please go ahead and get 2 meters if you are going to be buying fabric specifically for this pattern. So I've also done a little bit of a video already on how I've graded from a size 10 to a 12. Now I'm by all means not a professional on this. It is actually the first pattern that I've graded properly. I usually just take it in when I turn the dress inside out and just sort of freehand draw a line down the seam. But this time I have actually tried to grade on the pattern. So I used a ruler and I went from the 10 to a 12, sort of from the hip area down to the bottom of the skirt. So I'm hoping that that is going to be right for my shape. If it's not, then it's something that I'll have to deal with at a later stage. But if you know how to draft or to grade patterns for yourself already, then go ahead and do that if you need to. So the rest of this video then, you'll just be seeing my hands where I'm showing you the making up of the dress. So I hope you find this video really useful and it gives you some tips and tricks that you may not have used before, because I'm going to be doing the burrito method for the facing, the all-in-one facing that I'm going to be including in this. So I shall see you at the end of the video then with the finished dress. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see this, but what I've done is graded the pattern from a size 10 to a 12. So this is from the skirt section. So I've literally gone from the size 10 line and graded out here all the way down to the bottom of the hem to the 12. And I've just used a ruler for that. And I've done exactly the same on the back skirt piece. So I've literally only done it on the skirt pieces. So I've left the bodice as the size 10. Okay, so here is the Carnaby dress all cut out. You'll see that I have the front piece here, and I've cut that on the fold. And then the back pieces are here pinned together, right sides together. And then this is the back facing, and again this is pinned right sides together. So I will have used that then as an all-in-one facing once I've attached it, and then I've just done the front facing on the fold as per the instructions. And then we have here the back skirt section, and then the front skirt section. I've just left that on there so I know that's the front, and then the pocket bags. So yes, I'm all ready to start sewing it together, so I shall see you at the sewing machine. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do then is sew the darts on the front bodice, and I actually chalked out the line on the front of the bodice here, and I've just brought those legs together and pinned it. So I'll start that and then I'll do the other side. Okay, so both darts are done, as you can see. There's one here and one here. And then what you'll want to do on the reverse is to press that seam towards the bottom of the dress, so press it downwards. And then you could use a tailor's hand just to pop that over so you don't create a point on the dart, so you don't get pointy bust marks. Yeah, just use a tailor's hammer or a rolled up towel or something just to press over that on the outside. Okay, so the next stage in the process, you're actually supposed to attach the back bodice parts to the front bodice parts at the shoulder seams, but because I'm going to be using the back bodice pieces as one piece, because I'm just going to put a straight seam all the way down it, I'm actually going to stitch the back bodice together at the back seam. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'll attach them at the shoulders. Okay, so the back seam is sewn at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance then, and what I'm actually going to do is cut the seam allowance down, and then I'm going to overlock the edge with my overlock foot on my machine. But obviously if you're using a serger, then you can just go ahead and do that already. Okay, so the back seam has been overlocked and is pressed to one side, so I've now got the front bodice and the back bodice attached at the shoulder seams by pins, so I'm now going to stitch those together. Okay, so the shoulder seams are stitched, and I've cut down the seam allowance, and I've also overlocked that edge as well. And I've just now gone ahead and put the back facings together, right sides together, and I've just stitched that at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance and overlocked the edge as well for that. So now I'm going to attach the back and front facing pieces together at the shoulder seams. Okay, so then I've now put the facing right sides together onto the bodice, and I've pinned it around the neckline. So I've got the seam allowances going in different directions. So I've just pressed one to the back and one to the front, just so it eliminates a bit of the thickness around there. So then you just need to stitch around the neckline at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and then we will be getting ready to do the burrito method to stitch the armholes. Okay, so I've attached the facing to the neckline, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm just going to snip around with my pinking shears just to take away a little bit of that seam allowance. I don't want to overlock it because I don't want that bulk around the neckline, so I'm just going to use my pinking shears for that, just to reduce it, and that'll stop the fabric fraying. Okay, so once you've trimmed your seam allowance, you then need to flip your face into the inside of the dress and give the neckline a really good press. Then you want to have your dress opened out flat. Hopefully you can see this okay. And you'll have the facing basically underneath. So dress facing up, right side up with your neck in the middle. And then what you need to do, this is the burrito method then, where we're actually going to stitch the armholes. So you need to get one side of your dress and pick up the facing along with it as well, and literally roll it like this towards the other side of the armhole. And then once you get to the other side, you need to take the facing that's left underneath there, bring it round like this, so you leave the right side of the dress armhole there. I'm trying to get it so you can see, and get that facing underneath and bring it round. So then what you'll do is flip that over the rolled section of the dress and bring it right sides together with the other armhole. So that's both bits of the facing there. So you have a rolled dress on the inside. So then what you'll need to do is to pin along here, making sure you don't catch any of the dress that's rolled inside, and then you will stitch 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around that armhole with those fabrics right side together. Now this is where, if you want to take your armhole in any to make it a narrower shoulder, this is where you'll do it. So last time when I had issues with my dress, I unpicked it all and then ended up doing a 3 centimetre seam allowance, I think, something like that. But obviously this is a smaller dress, so I'm going to go ahead with just the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance on this and see how I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and pin around here, and then I'll take you to the sewing machine. Okay, so you'll see I've pinned all the way around that armhole section there, and I'm just going to stitch that at 1.5 centimetres seam allowance for that. And then the dress is literally sandwiched in between, so you do need to make sure that that is pushed out of the way when you put that underneath your sewing machine, so you don't catch it whilst you're stitching. Okay, so that's one armhole stitch then. I'm going to cut back this seam allowance again, just using pinking shears, just to reduce the amount of fabric that's there, because I know I'm not going to have to let it out any. If anything, I'll take it in, so it doesn't matter if I cut this fabric away. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how you pull the dress through so it turns it out to the right side. Okay, so I've pinked that, and then you literally just put your hand in and pull one dress through to the other side to turn it round the right way, basically. Just give it a little pull, and then the dress will come through, and you'll see that you have one side finished all neatly on that armhole. So all those raw seams are encased in there. Can you see that? So then the burrito method again. So I'll just go through it if you didn't see it the first time. So you need the facing, which is this side, on the bottom. So I'm going to turn it over so you have basically the dress facing right side up. And you need the edge that you've just done closest to you, and you're going to roll that then like a burrito as tightly as you can over to the other shoulder, and then you'll get to that point where you will have your armhole, and then the facing is obviously underneath. Here it is, and you just basically pull that through round to the other side, and then bring it round over the rolled section to meet up with that edge, and then again you pull the other side over here, bring that facing round over the rolled dress, and then you will again align that up right sides together with the other armhole, and then again pin it all the way around and stitch at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, or whatever seam allowance you are going to do for that. And then so I'll go ahead and pin that, stitch it and pink it again, and I'll pull it through again, showing you how to do that. Okay, so that's the second armhole done then, and I'm just going to bring the dress through again to the right side. So you literally just grab one bit inside and give it a little pull, and it'll start coming through all the way. And there, when you turn it out, you will see you have your finished armholes all in one there. So it's really, really neat. On the other side as well. So you just need to give that a nice press. And then it's on to the next stage. Okay, so I actually just tried it on after I'd pressed the armhole seams, and I thought, no, actually I am going to take the armhole in again a little bit, just because I felt it was still too wide for me. So I've literally just pulled the dress back through so it's inside out again, and I've done another line of stitching. If you can see this was my first line of stitching, and now that's my second line of stitching there. So I've just gone an extra just over 1/8 of an inch, just to bring so that the shoulder seam is a little bit narrower on me. So I'm going to do the other shoulder seam. So I'll just show you how I turned it wrong side out again. So I'll just pull this one right side through again, and then the other one, which I've not taken in, is this one. And I basically just put my hand into the facing and pulled the dress wrong side out again. So I just kept pulling until all the fabric comes through, so you literally can see the inside seam again, sorry. So yeah, just pull that through so you can see all of that armhole. So there's my armhole with its one line of stitching, and I'm just going to make sure that that dress is out of the way in the middle there. Just push the fabric out of the way and just literally do another line of stitching just to bring it in that little bit more, because it was just sitting a little bit too wide for me. So I'll do that, and then I'll bring it right sides out again. Okay, so that's done. So that's both taken in, so I'll pull it right sides through again, So just get to the facing side, put your hand in it and literally grab some fabric and start pulling it right sides out. So just need to go and give that another quick press then around the armholes. And then I will just try it on again just to check that I am happy with that. But looking at that, I think that should be quite a nice width on me. So yeah, fingers crossed that's enough. So I shall see you in a moment. Okay, so that's all pressed then. So I feel like I'm happy with those armholes now and the shoulders. So you will also notice that I've not used interfacing on the facing, and I have done that by purpose. I sometimes feel that it just doesn't need it, and on my other one it was a little bit stiff, so I decided not to do it on this one. Also, I haven't actually understitched the face into the seam allowance, and if you did want to do that, now is a good time to do it. So you can do it all around the armhole and around the neckline just before we do the side seams. And also to finish the facing off, I've just left it as a raw edge at the moment, and sometimes, you know, you can just turn it under and do a zigzag stitch over it if you wanted to, or use your overlocker if you have one. But what I'm going to do is finish that off with bias binding, just because I like that finish, and it just gives it, it just makes it pretty really, and stops obviously the fraying. So I'm going to leave that just unfinished, and I'll do that right at the very end. So now we're going to go on to the next stage, and you'll need two of your pocket bags for this bit, and then you'll be attaching it to the front bodice. So I'm going to turn mine upside down so it's facing away from me, and I'll just grab those pocket bags and then we attach those to the bottom of the front bodice. Okay, so I've picked up my pocket bags and pinned them literally to the bottom edge of the bodice. Now you'll need to make sure that the pocket bags, the rounded corner is on the inside, sort of on, and you'll have the straight edges, and they won't sit flush against the edge of the dress, because the dress goes slightly more A-line at the bottom. So yeah, just line up literally across the bottom there and pin it. Now you might have chosen to do your pocket bags in a contrast fabric. I initially didn't, but because I had very little fabric to fit all the pattern pieces on, I've had to cut 2 in this pink fabric, so I only had enough to cut 2 pocket bags and need 4 altogether. So I've chosen to have these, which will be the ones which will sit against your skin. So yeah, when you put your hands in, you might get a peep of colour, which I don't mind. So I'm going to put the pink ones on first. So then you need to then stitch those on up to 1.5 centimetre seam allowance across the bottom. So I'll go ahead and do that and then come back. Okay, so they're stitched then at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, just literally to the end of the pocket, and then I did a reverse stitch over that just to secure it a bit better. Then you'll need to press these pocket bags away from the bodice, so don't trim any seam allowances yet, so just press that away. Okay, and then once you've done that, what you'll need to do is to get your front bodice skirt section and have the top bit that's going to be attached to the bodice facing you, and pop the second lot of pocket bags on in exactly the same way that you've done on the bodice. So matching up the straight seam against the bodice, the skirt section that will be attached to the bodice. So the rounded bits of the pocket again will be sort of on the inside, and then again stitch those at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I've pinned them on there ready. Okay, so I've pressed them away on both the skirt and the front bodice, and then what you need to do is to lay the skirt section on top of the bodice, so placing the 2 pocket bags on top of each other, right sides together, like that, and then matching up the bottom of the bodice with the top of the skirt. So then you'll just need to pin all the way around that, and then we'll be stitching it. So I'll just go ahead and pin it for a start, and then I'll show you where you need to actually stitch around. Okay, so I've pinned around the pocket bags and then along the middle section of where the skirt is attached to the bodice, and again around this pocket bag, and then you'll be stitching at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. But what you'll need to make sure that you do is when you start stitching, you do it from the outside edge, so 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, coming down the outside edge to the bottom of the pocket bag, but you pivot before you get to the bottom, so making sure there's still 1.5 centimetres to go across the bottom. So get to this edge and again pivot, and then when you get up to the skirt, come up and then pivot and then sew across here. So you don't go all the way across, you stop when you get to the pocket bag, 1.5 centimetres in, and then pivot and go around this pocket bag, and then finish on the outside seam again. So you just need to back stitch at those edges there, and then what you'll need to do then is to trim the seam allowances, but not on the outside, because that will obviously be incorporated in the side seam of the skirt. So just literally take off the edge of the bottom and the inner pocket, the little section in between here, and then again just the bottom of the pocket bag the other side and on the inner, so leave the outside ones as they are. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll see what the next step is. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut those seam allowances, and I've overlocked the edges. The sections where it's sort of in between the pocket bags, I haven't overlocked that, I've just pinked it with my pinking shears, just because it was a bit awkward to get under my foot. I suppose this is the joy of when you have an overlocker, you probably won't have this problem. You could just overlock the edge before you attach the pockets to it, so that would make it a lot neater. Yeah, so I've just pinked that with my pinking shears, just so hopefully it'll stop it unravelling in the wash, fingers crossed. And I've done that on both sides as well, so on the other side there, I've just pinked it a little bit, yeah. Okay, so now you need to press the pockets down and press all the seam allowances down. So I'll take this over to the ironing board and do that, and then we just need to literally attach the back skirt section to the bottom of the back bodice, and then we're at the point where we can stitch the side seams. Okay, so I'll go and iron those pockets down and just give that seam line a good press, and then I'll get the back skirt section over, and fingers crossed it should fit the bottom of this bodice this time. Okay, so with your back bodice then facing away from you, so you've got your armholes closest to you, get your back skirt section, and you need to place it right sides down on top of the bodice at the back, and line up the edges. So this time it fits, yay! So I'll go ahead and pin that, and then all you need to do is stitch it at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and overlock your edges if you're not using an overlocker. Okay, so today we're going to pin and sew the side seams of the dress. So you need to turn the dress right sides together, and then make sure you line up your seams for the skirt portion, and then literally pin all the way up, and then where you have this facing section here, what you need to do is make sure that that's up. So you don't want to have it down, it needs to be up, so match that seam as well. I think you can have the seam allowances down on that, but just, yeah, make sure that facing piece is up, so you pin and sew down there. So be sewing with 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, unless you decide otherwise. I have tried it on and tried to pin it down the side of me, and I think the skirt is a little bit on the tight side in the size 10, and I probably should have graded from a 10 to a 12 further up than I actually did on the pattern. But anyway, it's cut out now, so what I'll do is just taper the seam allowance to make it smaller towards the bottom, so I've just got a little bit more fabric. Yeah, fingers crossed that works out okay. Right, so I'll go ahead and pin and sew down the side seams, and then come back and show you. I will just say, when you are pinning the side seams, do make sure that you catch the pocket, because you do need to include that in the seam allowance when you stitch it together. So do that on both sides. Okay, then whilst I've been gone, I have actually had to take this dressing quite a bit, from under the arm down to sort of around this area on me. It's fine from the hip downwards. I actually, what I did initially was did 5/8 of an inch, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, all the way down to sort of there. If I turn it around so I can show you where the pocket is, it'll give you a better idea. So I did 1.5 centimetres initially, all the way down, and then I started bringing it into 3/8 of an inch, just sort of down here, and then carried on 3/8 of an inch all the way down to the bottom of the hem, just purely for my shape because I'm more hippie. And then when I tried that on, it was fine at the bottom, but I still had quite a bit of gaping underneath the arm and down my waist because I have got a very small waist in comparison to my hips. So I then brought it in again. You'll see that's my first line of stitch in there, and then I brought it in again by 1/8 of an inch, and then it was still too gapy, so I brought it in again another 1/8 of an inch, and then you'll see that I've actually brought that even further down, and then gone back into the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, which then tapers to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Yeah, so for me, I've had to play around with the shape a little bit of this dress just to get it to fit to my body proportions. So what I will attempt is to try and transfer that onto my pattern pieces. So in the future, if I make this dress, I'm not going to have problems like that. So I think, to be honest, I'm probably an 8 bodice down to sort of a 10 lower waist and then a 12 on the skirt. So I sort of need to grade over 3 sizes. Anyway, so the sides are done anyway. And now I just need to hem the bottom of the skirt, and then it's basically done. I will overlock those edges and cut off the excess. But what I want to do is obviously put bias binding around the neckline facing to finish that. And I'm going to bias bind the hem so I don't lose too much length, because it is quite a short dress and I couldn't lengthen it any because I didn't have enough fabric. So yeah, that would just keep the length slightly when I do that, and it makes it a really nice finish. And when you sit down in it, it stops it folding over at the back, because I do have that happen on a few of my dresses. So the weight of the bias binding will stop that. So that's the next stage, and I'll show you how I do the bias bound hem and the facing. Okay, so I'm ready to start applying bias binding then to the neckline facing and the hem. And I'm going to be making my own bias binding just because I don't have any in stock in my house. So I've cut some fabric strips on the diagonal at a 45-degree angle. And I've cut that at 1.5 inches in strips. And then I've got to join them because they're not long enough. So I've already joined one, you'll see here. And to do that, you lay one fabric strip right side up and then the other one wrong side facing down on top of it, meeting the square edge. And I've just pinned that, and then you're going to sew diagonally from one end to the other, so from the top sort of bit down to the bottom corner, and then that when that opens up, it will be flush with that. So I'll go ahead and sew that, and then I'll show you how to make it the correct size, ready for putting onto the garment. Okay, so that's sewn just here, and then I'm going to actually cut that excess off. So I'll show you how I do that. So it's literally where you've got the diagonal. I'm just going to snip across this section here just to cut the excess fabric off. So when you open it out, you'll see that then you've got a small amount of fabric there. So I'm just going to iron that so it's flat here, just so then the seam allowance, I can get it to, need to put my steam on as well. That's better. Just press that, and that opens that out nice and flat, just like that. And I'll just do a quick press on the other side as well. There we go. Now I'm going to now make the bias binding. Now, I've got this little tool, and it's a clover bias binding maker, and the size I've got is, I think it's an 18, it says on the front, clover 18, and it's the red one. I think you can get them in different colours for the different sizes. I'm not entirely sure what size the bias bind machine makes, but what you do is you get your bias binding strip at one end, and you fold it so the edges meet together. I'll show you. So if I just fold that over, and you'll see that those two fold the edges into each other like that, and you just feed that little section that you've just done into your bias binder at the big end, into this little tool. I think that's right. Keep pushing it until you get a little bit come out of the other end. There, and you'll just be able to sort of grab a bit there and just pull that out, and you'll see that it keeps it kind of folded together. Now, when you get it coming out of that end, you need to get your iron and press on that, and then as you do it, so you just sort of move your iron along as you're pulling it with this little handle, so it's ironing the folds down, and just keep going. So your sort of iron needs to act as a weight to grab it out. So as you go, just keep sort of pressing it, pulling, pressing, pulling and pressing at the same time. And you do that all the way along, so you'll see it's making a nice folded edge for the bias binding. So I'll continue to do that until I get to the very end, and then we'll be able to attach it onto the dress. Okay, so that's all sewn together, so I'm hoping you can see this so my shadow doesn't go over the dress. But you need to have your dress wrong side out, so you've just got the right side of the facing showing you. And I'm going to start at the back. So just to let you know, this bias binding, now I've made it up, I'll tell you how much it actually measures. So it is 3/4 of an inch wide. So you can have narrower if you want, but that's what this one works out from a 1.5 inch strip. So it takes it down to 3/4 of an inch. Now, when I attach my bias binding on the back, I'm going to start at the seam line that I've got for this, of the back facing. And then what you want to do is have the folded section facing up, and then just turn out one edge so you can see that crease line. And that edge of this bit here needs to be flush with the edge of the facing. So I'll show you. So I just like to fold a little bit over as well, just on the edge there. And I just attach that first bit to the facing. So I'll just grab my pins and pop that in there. So you'll just pull it round, and because it's cut on the bias, it does have stretch, so it will go around corners absolutely fine. So just sort of give it a gentle stretch to ease it around those corners. So I'll just show you what I mean. So I've just literally stitched the edge up to the edge of the facing, and then you're going to continue that all the way around the edge of the facing, and then when you get to here, you just sort of leave a tail. So I'll show you that. So I'll carry on pinning that round and then come back and show you what I do at the edge before we sew it. Okay, so that's all pinned all the way around then, and at the end, where I folded it over initially, I've just left this long tail, and I haven't pinned right up to it because I will fold that over to make it flush somehow. I can't actually remember how I do it until I come to do it. So I will show you that before I stitch it. But what you need to do then is now stitch along the crease line all the way around the facing. So start at the edge that you put down, folded down initially, and then come to the edge here, and then we shall see how we get that folded nicely. Okay, so I've got to the bit where I've got that tail, and where I've got the folded section initially, where I've just stitched on that fold. So when you get to this bit where you've got the tail, you just need to leave it, you don't need to fold it or anything, you're just going to literally just overlap it slightly, and just let it sit over it. So you still want to just stitch in this fold line, and then just take it just slightly over, and then when you come to flip the bias binding over, sorry if this is a bit wibbly, I'm trying to hold the camera at the same time, and when you fold it over, you'll just have a nice folded edge, but I'll show you that when we actually do come to flip it round. Yeah, so just literally stitch it maybe to about sort of here, just a little bit, and then you'll cut off the excess. So I'll do that and then I'll show you. Okay, so I've just overlapped it slightly there, and then I'm just going to cut off a little bit of this tail now. And so I'll just get my scissors to snip that. So you'll see I'm just literally going to cut just a little bit off. Ooh, make that straight. There. So it's now just overlapped slightly. So when you come to, because it's a fold over here like that, and then when you come to flip it round to the other side of the facing, you'll see you'll just have a nice fold. So it won't be a raw edge, there'll be no unravelling of that or any fraying. So now you've done that, what you then need to do is flip the bias binding round to the other side of the facing. So I'll come round to the table just so I can show you that easier. Okay, so we've got our facing stitched on then. So where you can see that we've stitched in this crease line, you're going to bring the other bit of the bias binding down and then fold that bit kind of up so you catch the seam allowance in, and then you're going to fold the bias binding around it. Now what I'm going to do before I do that is just trim that seam allowance just a little bit along with the bias binding, just so it gives me a bit of a neater finish, because when you fold it over sometimes the seam is just a little bit too big and it makes it a bit thick. So I'm just literally going to just trim that down slightly, but then what you're going to do is, yeah, just fold it over so you've got it coming all the way around, and that looks a lot neater. So that's the right side. Now to stitch it down, you can either stitch it by hand, doing a catch stitch on the inside, so on the wrong side of the facing, or you can stitch in the ditch on the top here, just going into this sort of edge there. Now that's what I'm going to do, and it should catch the other side of the bias binding here. Sometimes it doesn't catch it and you will have to go back and redo a little bit, and you know, it doesn't really matter because what the stitches look like, because you're not going to see that side. So it's just on the top, then you won't actually visibly see the stitches if you stitch in the ditch. I do have a stitch in the ditch foot for my machine, but you don't have to have that. Just take it really slowly and try and get in right in between that seam line. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to just sort of cut a bit of that excess seam allowance away, fold it round, and then I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So I shall come back once I've done that. Now when you get to that bit where you've got the edges, so what you'll need to do is you've got the bit, the first piece that you first piece that you folded over, which you sewn first. So you'll need to wrap it around the other bit that you overlapped underneath. So you just need to pop that round there, do you see? So you've got it like that, and then when you fold it round the other side, it will make a nice little neat line. So because that's folded, obviously it's not a raw edge, it won't fray or unravel. But when you come to do that, it'll look a lot neater than I've just sort of demonstrated there. Yeah, so that's how you do it. So I'll go ahead and sort all that out then, and then we'll come back, and then you'll see how pretty it looks on the facing, and then it's time to hem. Okay, so I've stitched that all down, and there we have it, a nicely finished facing. So it encloses all the raw edges. As you can see, it's just got a little line of stitching on the inside there, and I've stitched in the ditch. Some are visible and some are not, so it's not too badly done. And so that just finishes the facing then. So not only have you got clean seams where we did the all-in-one facing and closed all the armholes, so there's no raw seams. We've now got no raw seams on the edge of the facing, so I think it looks really nice finish. So then you just want to stitch down the edge on the sides just to stop that flipping out when you're wearing it. So you could just do a few little catch stitches just there to hold the facing down, just underneath the arms, the armholes on each side on that. So now I'm going to show you how to do the bias bound hem. Okay, so to do the hem then, have the dress right side facing out, and you get your bias binding, and again you're going to line it up with the raw edge. So you're going to unfold one section and have the very raw edge of that lined up with the bottom of the raw edge of the skirt, and then pin that all the way along. And then what you're going to do again is stitch in that crease line all the way around, and then you'll be able to flip it round to the other side. But we're not going to have this bias binding visible on the outside of the dress, so we'll be turning the whole of the bias binding all the way to the inside. So what I'll do is go ahead and pin and stitch that to the edge, and then I'll show you how we flip it to the inside. Okay, so I've stitched all that on to the hem. So you'll see there's my raw edge, stitched in that crease line, and then what you'll now want to do is to fold it down to the bottom like so, and then what we're going to do is bring it all the way around to the other side. So you're not going to just go over that seam edge like we did before, so you don't need to cut away that excess. What you're actually going to do is fold the whole bias binding all the way to the inside of the skirt, and then just roll it slightly so you've got a little bit of the skirt coming to the inside. And then what you can either do again is hand stitch a catch stitch so you don't have a visible seam on the outside, or you can just literally stitch on the outside so you catch it at the very edge there. So you could actually stitch on top of here as long as your bobbin thread is the right colour that you want to be on the outside of the dress. So that's what I'm going to do. I don't mind having a seam line at the bottom. So it's just personal preference, to be honest. So yeah, just again to show you that. So you have it where you've stitched it on like this, and then you just get that big flap there, keep it folded, that edge, and then just flip it all the way to the inside, and then just roll it slightly and then press it with an iron, so give that a good crease line there, so you just have a little bit of the dress on. And then on the outside you can see that you don't see the bias binding, and it just gives it a little bit more stability at the bottom of the skirt, and also you only then turn up literally that sort of much of a hem, so 3/8 of an inch probably there, so you don't lose much of the length of the dress, which is good for me because obviously I didn't have very much fabric. So I'll go ahead and do that then, and then I think the dress is finished. So I'll do that and then come back to you. Okay, all hemmed then. So I just top stitched on the top with mine, just with a sort of contrasting thread. It's a pinky kind of thread, and then that's what the inside looks like. So you'll see a bit of fluff. Yeah, it's nice and neat, and you've just got that little rolled in section there, so you don't see the bias binding from the outside. It just gives it a nice clean finish. So I think that looks really good on the inside, and then also on the facing it looks really pretty as well, as you can see. So I shall see you then at the trying on stage, so you can see the dress on me. Like I said earlier, I did have a few little fit issues, where you saw I had to take it in quite a bit in areas. So I'll pop it on anyway, and then you can see it in its full glory. And then I'll just have a little chat with you at the end of this video. Okay, so here we are at the trying on stage then. I have to say I'm really, really happy with the finished dress. I was a little bit dubious at first once I'd made those changes as to whether the fit was still going to be right for me. But now I've hemmed it and put the facing, you know, the edging on the facing, it fits really nicely, so I'm really pleased with it. I still think I would like the armholes in slightly more like that, but that's just my personal preference. So I think even if I did the size 8 bodice at the top there, I probably would still have to take that in slightly. I just think it's the style of the dress, so maybe I'm trying to make a silhouette that it isn't. But I'm overly pleased with how it's fitting. I mean, it's really nice and close now there, and it's not too low, even though I've brought the armholes in a little bit more. Yeah, and the bust mark's just in the right place, so that's really nice. Yeah, so I'll stand back then so you can see it. Again, I'll have to take my microphone off. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, so it's got this pink pocket, so it gives you a little bit of a peek. Then when I put my hands in, it fits really nice. I would like maybe slightly a little bit more room in the bum area, but I think that's because when I tapered it on the pattern, I did it literally from the skirt section, didn't I, for the size 10 down to the 12, and I maybe should have done that from about here, just to go out slightly more there. But bearing in mind I have took it in quite a lot down this section here, so I think I will need a size 8 bodice, 10 sort of waist area and a 12 skirt, but the changes I've made fits okay, so I might be able to transfer those over to the pattern piece, you never know. Yeah, so I'm really pleased. I mean, I've not got too much excess at the back, so that's nice and fitted as well. I quite like the length. It's a little bit shorter than anticipated, but that was because I couldn't add any length to the dress when I had it on the when I laid the pattern pieces on the fabric, because I only had 1.5 meters. Yeah, so I've got that little peep of the bias binding at the bottom then. Sorry, that's my petticoat underneath, just so it doesn't stick to my skin. Yeah, so really, really pleased with it. So hopefully you've managed to follow the sew along okay. Now I will say that hopefully I've added that section in on the tutorial where where you were adding the skirt pieces together. I think there was one bit that I said, oh, don't hem this bit or finish the seam lines. That was it. Don't finish the edges yet. But I think that definitely should have been done. So what I'll do then is I'll take this off and turn it inside out just so I can talk you through a little bit of it. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've just popped my other Carnaby dress on as well, just so I can show you the difference. So this one is still really baggy around the arm area, even though I did take it in 3 centimetres each side. So yeah, you can see that coming in down a size actually has made a difference. So I'll just stand back and just show you the fit difference on this one. So it's still where I've brought it in there. This one's a little bit tighter on the bottom here, just because when I had that issue of where the skirt didn't fit the bodice because of I'd cut the back on the fold, not realising there was that curve in the sorry, just put this back on, where there was that curve in the back pattern piece, which I didn't realise was there. So thank you, Joy at Pink Coat Club. If you're watching this, thank you for letting me know that that was there, because it is just a gentle curve, but it just made all the difference to the size of the bodice piece to fit onto the skirt. Anyway, so back onto the dress then. So you can see now that that is beautifully finished around there. Really, really happy with that, how that's turned out. This was just some scrap fabric that I had in my stash, which was actually going to go to the sort of fabric bin, as it were, but I thought, oh, I'd use it for that because it's contrasted quite well. Yeah, and the bottom, I'm really happy with that as well, how that's turned out, and I've just done top stitch that with pink thread. And then the section that I was talking about where I think you should finish the seam allowances, where I say don't do it on the actual sew along, is when you attaching the skirt to the bodice here. Now, if you remember, I've had to pink a section of it because the seams weren't finished, and because I'd already attached the pockets, I literally couldn't get that underneath the foot because it's already attached. That bit's overlocked there, but it was when I was attaching the pockets. So yeah, in the sew along you'll hear me say, yeah, don't finish those the seam allowances yet, and I'm going to put a note across the bottom, or I should have done that by now, just to say, yes, do finish the seam allowances. And I think that is at the point where you could also bias bind your hem, if you want to, you know, the bias bind your seam, sorry, should I say, if you wanted to do Hong Kong finishes on, you know, throughout, whereas I've just overlocked in some places. In the future I probably will do that. It's just that this was really the only second time that I've made this dress, so that's something that I've just learned, that yeah, you should finish the seam allowances at that stage. But I'm pleased with how the inside looks overall. It's still pretty neat, so it's just not as pretty as I probably would have finished it if I'd have realised in some areas. I mean, I could have done a French seam for the back seam as well. So, I mean, if you're an experienced sewer, then you probably would have done all this already anyway. But if you're new to sewing, then that's something maybe you want to consider on a future make or something. Yeah, so thank you for joining me on this sew along. I hope you found it beneficial, and that you've picked up any tips and tricks that you might not have known about before. For instance, the burrito method for the all-in-one facing, because you can use that on any other dress pattern where you're using an all-in-one facing, where you won't have a back zip or anything like that. So this dress fits perfectly over my head without the zip. So yeah, fingers crossed I'm going to get those pattern changes made to the actual pattern, so when I make this dress again in the future, it will fit okay, and I won't have to keep taking it in because it is a bit annoying. It's nice to just, you know, have a quick sew sometimes. But yes, I'm really pleased with the fabric choice as well, and that really goes well with my pink Blackwood cardigan. So it looks really nice together, and with a nice necklace on, you know. So I'll probably wear it with flat sort of shoes just because it's quite a short dress, and if I wear heels it just more sort of scope to see more than you should. So thank you ever so much for watching, and please like and subscribe. I'd appreciate any comments that you've got, or any you know, bits that you want to say that I should have improved on. You know, I'm all ears. Please put your comments in the description box down below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye.